All right. Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Suzy Harris, and this is my podcast called Next 7. The purpose of this podcast is to be a voice for ensuring that all beings have access to clean, organic food, clean water, and result-oriented functional health care. In achieving these things, we can ensure that our next 7 generations are left with a world that allows them to thrive. What I mean by this is your level of wellness runs your level of vitality and your ability to thrive. Your wellness absolutely rides on the nutritive value and non-toxic status of your food and your water. Also, working with functional health physicians and practitioners gives you the tools you need to understand the hidden issues that affect your health. So clean water, clean food, sensible health care that empowers you to be in charge of your health makes it more possible to leave this world in a better place for our next generations to come. And I really care about that. Also, one of my good friends and colleagues is a guest for me today, Melissa Maki. She's the owner and she's a functional health practitioner at Gratitude for Wellness in Willsboro, New York. She was born and raised in Ithaca, New York, has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I'm so glad you're here with me.
I am too.
Yes, you're a 5-element acupuncturist and you're certified in Chinese herbal medicine and biomedical sciences. Just a little bit more about your background. After 16 years in your career as a mental health practitioner, you decided to shift into helping people with a more Chinese medicine approach. Your practice, Gratitude for Wellness in Willsboro, New York, it's an extremely well-rounded wellness center. You're there on just under a decade, where you're teaching patients about toxicity, how that affects their bodies. Let's see, you offer support in healthy eating through the 5 Seasons diet plan. You incorporate the use of essential oils, and you offer thermography services for monitoring breast health and full body lymph and inflammation issues. So, wow, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. And, your friendship has meant so much to me this year. We've been through so much together, watching all these things go by. And just for the audience to let them know, we're kind of hanging out today and having a colleague conversation. And I wanted to video and record it so people could just kind of have an experience of what our practitioners talking about who are on the ground and helping people through this last year and a half of SARS-CoV-2 viruses and things like that. So thank you again for making time to be with me today.
Yes.
One of the things I thought might be useful for people to hear or to check out is, let's start with your practice. The way that you work with your patients when they come in, if people had an understanding of your approach, like if you could just narrow it down to a few things you do to evaluate a person's status. And then we'll get into what kind of patterns did we see this year that might have been a little different compared to our usual.
So initially when people come in, we talk with them. We spend between 90 minutes and 2 hours on their first appointment. So we really get to know people and really listen to what's going on for them physically, mentally, spiritually. And then I think the most important thing we do is what we call taking the pulses. And so in 5-element acupuncture, we are taught to take 12 different pulses that correspond to organ systems. So when we talk about the lung, for example, there's a whole channel of points for the lung meridian, but there is a pulse that is connected to that channel. So when we take the pulses, we're listening to 12 different organ systems to see how are they functioning, what's the vitality of the pulse, are they all equal? Our organ systems all have jobs, and in Chinese medicine, they have the jobs that we know in Western medicine, right? Like the large intestine gets rid of the waste, but they also have emotional and spiritual jobs. So the lung is connected to breath, which we understand in Western medicine. In Chinese medicine, there's an expanded definition of not just breath, but grief, loss, faith, that it's all connected underneath the lung immune system. And so when we take pulses, for me, it's one thing to listen to somebody's story. This is how I feel. This is what I'm struggling with. This is my pain. And then you go and you listen to the body, because the body doesn't lie. And so you can listen to these pulses and figure out what these organ systems are, how they're functioning. Are they working together? Is there an area that really needs boosting? And then we combine the treatment plan between what someone is telling me and what the pulses are telling me, and then create a treatment plan from there. And that's how we choose acupuncture points.
Awesome. So I got it. And then, so this year, I keep
Mm-hmm.
saying this year, but really
Mm-hmm.
whenever this all started,
Mm-hmm.
when we realized that there was an immune challenge, a virus that was really knocking hard
Mm-hmm.
on communities across the world. Um, when did this start? Was it like 2019?
March of
Yeah.
2020.
2020. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just seems like a blur to me.
It does seem like a blur, but I remember having been told to shut my doors.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
all I
That's a
remember.
vivid memory.
Yeah, it's a vivid memory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you came back, when you
Yeah.
were allowed to come back and
Mm-hmm.
start seeing people,
Mm-hmm.
was it all over the place what you were seeing, or did you see it? Let's hear what you saw. What did you notice in people when
Well,
you
it was interesting because we were shut down for 6 weeks in New York State. We were then considered essential, and acupuncturists were able to return to work after the 6 weeks. And interestingly, when I reopened, I would say 90% of my clientele came back. It was like I'd never even shut my doors. People came back, they felt safe. We, of course, had put in all the precautions that were insisted upon or highly recommended. So people just felt really super safe and fine to come. And really, I feel like what I managed the most was fear. Um, and and that was really, and we believe in a ton of education here. So I would be educating constantly about the immune system, the innate immune system. Food is medicine. What can you do? And we know that when you're under an incredible amount of fear for a long period of time, that diminishes your immune system dramatically. And so that was a lot of the conversation that I was having with people was, that the locus of control is within us. It's not outside of us. And that was kind of my mantra from March 2020 through the end of the year, was the locus of control is within us. So we have so much power in how we boost our innate immune system and how we stay safe from any virus, any bacteria, anything. And so that's what I managed the most, was people's fear and what they were listening to on the media, and just trying to get them back to this balanced, grounded place where they could access their own wisdom and power to stay healthy. That was the primary thing that I dealt with.
Yeah. Okay. So when you were reading pulses and everything, was it just the usual, but the reasons were different?
Yes, the pulses, it was kind of there wasn't really anything that showed up that was significantly different except stress. That fear tends to pull down lung and heart pulses. And so I would feel that often in people. But it was pretty much the run of the mill. People were coming in for either issues that they were still working on, that they were coming in with chronic pain or, stomach GI issues or whatever it was for them. Um, and then I had a number of people coming in really just to stay centered and calm because their fear and anxiety were just skyrocketing.
So how does that present in a pulse way, or is it just what you're listening to as a story?
Mostly I see it in lung and heart. And how I make sense of that is that, it's the chest. And so when we get scared, we often don't take deep breaths. And so it's kind of that sensation of like, everything's kind of held in the chest and the breathing gets shallow and we go into that fight or flight system. And that's where it would show up is the lung pulse and the heart pulse would be deficient.
Okay, so deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're holding, we're not allowing flow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And would you say that was more so than usual because of all this, the whole SARS-CoV-2 stuff?
It wasn't, honestly, it wasn't out of the ordinary because that's a stress response.
Mm-hmm.
And we're under stress a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I see it regularly, even before all of this. Like, people are under stress a lot, or their bodies are interpreting outward events as stressful. And so it manifests in the body, but I wouldn't say that it was, it certainly wasn't on every single person walking in here.
Mm-hmm.
It was just some people had that presentation, and that was probably the biggest common denominator of that time. There wasn't really anything physical. It really was that emotional, spiritual place of, am I safe?
Isn't that
Am I
interesting?
going to
So,
die? I mean, it was, yeah.
so a really big emotional fear layer that was affecting people's wellness. Got it.
Yes.
So I just want to say, when you and I talk about things that we tried in our practices with our people and what got traction and what did not, we are not giving anyone health advice here. We don't know you personally. This wouldn't be something for you to listen to and go run off and try. You should let a practitioner evaluate you specifically. So, but I am curious to hear, what kind of approaches did you take with your people, or was it just your normal, this is the imbalance you found and you just use your general practices to help them come back?
I used a lot of my mental health degree. I really did. It came in really handy because people were, well, they were mad, right? So we had like this anger reaction. We had um, the fear, fight or flight response reaction. We actually had grieving, a lot of grieving reactions. And so it really was, I feel like that time of this pandemic was spent just supporting people emotionally and reminding them that there's things that they could do today and every day to really support and nourish and strengthen their immune system, that they didn't have to be afraid. And maybe that comes because of the Chinese medicine background that I have. I mean, that was one of the things I was kind of blown away by, is because this medicine is, over 5,000 years old, and we have multiple herbal formulas that kill really strong viruses. But there was never an invitation to our community um, to join the discussion. And there was a hospital in Wuhan who basically treated through TCM medicine, that's traditional Chinese medicine, so acupuncture and herbs and qigong, um, and pretty much everyone recovered and was released from there. And they luckily wrote down all their protocols, the acupuncture points, the Chinese formulas. The virus entered several different ways into the body. If you remember, sometimes it went to the respiratory system first, sometimes it went through the gut first. When this first came out, there were like different pathways that it would enter. And so depending on the person, depending on how it showed up in the person, you have to treat everyone individually because everyone's unique. And so they had documented everything and then sent that out. And so, unfortunately, there was no dialogue with Chinese medicine about if there was a way that we could help with this. But I knew enough to know that I didn't need to be afraid. And I really just tried to pass that on to clients constantly, that there were things that we could do every day to be healthy, and that level of fear, just, number one, it's not healthy, but it wasn't even valid. You didn't have to be that scared of it.
Okay. And so, people following the guidelines and, especially in the beginning, being careful with social distancing and masks and all that stuff, but also along with that, the empowerment of knowing we know how to read your bodies and assist you in stoking the fires for your immune system strength, managing your stress so you're not weakening yourself, like more tools, not just sitting there waiting for what's next.
Right. Everything from exercise to meditation to visualization to yoga, to what you're eating or not eating every day. There was so much that, and again, this is still a missing piece in this discussion. Um, that what we do and how we feel every day directly contributes to the health of our cells and our immune system. And I spent a lot of time talking about that with people.
Now, did you have any folks in your practice who were positive for COVID? Anybody that actually had COVID?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we treated a couple people that had it and recovered fine. We treated some people that are now would be considered long haulers from COVID. We and yes, so we treated all of that.
The long haulers, just for people who might not know, that's generally people who were ill with COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and their recovery, they just were left with a lagging, it's like a sticking around fatigue, and other like poor digestion and things like that.
Mhm.
How are those people doing? Are they still struggling in your practice?
No, no,
Okay.
they're doing better. Yeah, they're doing better. And again, we saw just a small fraction of people. We have a smallish practice over here, so we didn't see a ton of them, but we did see them. Hmm.
How about, did anyone die that you know of?
No,
You didn't have any people die?
no,
Hospitalizations, maybe?
nope.
Not that you were aware of.
Mm-mm.
Okay. I mean, I'll say in my own practice, I had a few, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 people off the top of my head who were really sick. They got so sick. And they combined a few different approaches, the medical approach, along with some of the work that we do here, and sometimes acupuncture as well. A
Mhm.
lot of detoxing to get the toxicity. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But to move the toxicity from the immune event out of your system was a big part of kind of pulling them through to the other side. And I do have a couple of people that were hospitalized, one of whom pretty much almost died.
Mm.
And the story that I heard of how that went was not great. It was really, even in the hospitals, everybody was so afraid and didn't know what they were doing at first. I can't imagine the frontline folks trying to figure that out on their feet. Oh
Yeah.
my God. So, I don't want to make light at all of the seriousness, just because you and I are talking about manage the fear, manage the stress,
Mhm.
uplift your immune system function.
Mhm.
Um, it doesn't mean that we're not acknowledging that there were some very serious events.
Mhm. Yes, and I treat several frontline workers, and that was still the discussion because, like you said, it was kind of this controlled chaos, and all these new protocols and all this new safety stuff, and just kind of how they were dealing with what they were seeing and feeling in that environment um, was incredibly stressful, especially for those who had young children and families and wondering, am I safe? Like, am I safe to come home after having worked in the hospital for 12
Yeah,
hours?
there were a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I felt that way. My partner is a teacher, and I do what I do. So there's people coming through here, and we were like, should we be 6 feet apart at home? Like, for a minute we did, because we really weren't sure.
Yeah.
And then once we kind of tiptoed in, like, okay, through different approaches of evaluating our own health and then exploring,
Hmm.
it's everybody's, like you said earlier, everybody's so individual. And
Hmm.
so a one size fits all, one option, as a solution to the monstrosity of a challenge doesn't exist. It's not like that, not in functional health.
Right.
So, all right. Well, so curious, again, just you and I as friends and colleagues chatting and doing it in front of the camera so people can, witness people like you and me and what we've gone through and what we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Your teachers and mentors that you stay connected to for guidance as you always expand your practice and how you keep learning how to confront different layers of health for people.
Mm-hmm.
Were your mentors, was there any message that you heard from your mentors that got your attention, or any that left you with questions or made you shift how you were looking and practicing? Sorry, I'm going to mute myself because there's a siren.
No, there was actually not a lot of discussion in the Chinese medicine, in the 5-element community. And I actually don't know what to contribute that to. The discussion mostly was about how do we get back in, like, how do we reopen? How do we get back in, and because we can help. It was like a war was happening, and you have this whole army of people who really can help, and we were told to stand down and shut our doors and walk away. And that was the hardest thing for me, because I knew that I could help. And so, and I think, as we talk, you go back to that time, right, in ways that you might have forgotten before. And so as we're talking, I just remember that being a really crazy time, not only because we didn't know a lot, but personally it was hard because we were told to shut down. It was like, how do we keep our business open? How do we pay our bills? How do we stay alive financially? And so I think everybody during that time was just focused on survival, especially small business owners. And so there really wasn't a broad discussion except what was coming through from, I'm licensed in Florida, so I got information from kind of the state of Florida. They were the ones that probably provided the most Chinese medicine information. And that's where that study from Wuhan came in, was through the state of Florida. But really what I did, because I felt like this really was a Western medicine issue, is I went and started reading and researching doctors that I've always highly respected, and to see what were they saying, what was this, and going to people, like you and I have had multiple conversations around this, because I love your work and I trust your work. And so I went to people that I knew and trusted, to just see what were they saying, what were they making of this, and then how could we translate that into a Chinese medicine perspective. Oh, you're still muted.
So there's the Saturday Night Live skit for us. I just love this Zoom stuff.
I know.
So I guess I'll just throw this in here now, because you and I do follow some of the same teachers. And so what I've learned along the way is that the coronavirus and its spike protein, right? Mm-hmm. The spike is the part of the virus, a part of its genetics, that will hook onto a cell and allow the virus to get in the cell and start replicating and creating an infection. Mm-hmm. And so it seems that this particular virus, the spike protein that is on this virus, has an affinity for the linings of blood vessels. This is what I've read across many different streams of information from the doctors that I study under. When we breathe it in, of course, it's hitting the vasculature of our lungs. We didn't know that at first. We now know, apparently, that inflammation of the blood vessels in the lungs makes it very difficult for the lung tissue to pass oxygen into that blood vessel where you get oxygen brought through your blood around your body. So you're breathing, but you're not getting oxygen. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. Dr. Pierre Corey, he's a pulmonologist, highly vetted medical doctor who testified in front of the Senate about his research, which we'll talk about in a second. But, you know, we now know that when you come in an acute state and you're breathing, but your O2 is dropping, they're going to nebulize some steroids to try to get the inflammation out of your blood vessels of your lungs to start getting oxygen to cross. We now know that oxygen's a good idea, but not forced ventilator oxygen. By the way, this is not a protocol. This is not an across the board because everyone's different and not all of the response time, not all of the responses to a person in crisis would be following what I'm saying exactly. But the general trend was get the inflammation out of the blood vessels. So we'll talk more about the protocols that in his study came forward to help not only with prevention, but if someone got ill, pulling them back from getting sicker, and people who were extremely ill and heading for ventilators, pulling them back out of the crisis and getting them out of it. 98% survival rate with the things that they've discovered. So these are the places you and I kind of walk lightly, because whenever you start talking about these things, it's such a heated subject. And I find it very fascinating, you know, like in the general population, you have people who feel very comfortable following an allopathic medical approach to their health. And sometimes they dabble around in natural health and functional stuff. But for the most part, they're healthy, they feel great, and they have a doctor they trust and they go that route. Then there's a bunch of people that doesn't work for them. Their situations are maybe more complex, and medical world doesn't always get to the underpinnings for why they can't get out of their health problem. And so they trip on over into the Chinese medicine or the stuff like I do or other functional medicine doctors. And so they hit this same event of this virus hitting the globe. One, not that there were two camps only, but a trend of people follow what they know on the medical side and a trend follow their functional side. There's usually a blend. It's never usually either or. It's always both and.
Right. I think that's actually the ideal, is both and. Yeah.
But it's just been so heartbreaking for me. And we're all talking about it, right? Like such division and argument around the way. And if you're not doing it, you're irresponsible and you're not caring about others. And oh my God, we won't go too far down that rabbit hole. But when I talk about what we've learned from our mentors, the things that I've learned put me in a position to want to share what I was learning, but tiptoeing on eggshells. Because I love the people in my practice, and the people, they're going to talk to people, and who knows where else the information goes. And just trying really hard to be non-alienating. But wow, I guess I've never seen such a feverish hold on a perspective. And waving it as it's the truth, the option. And if you're not following these, I don't know what the hell's gone wrong with you. You know, and in fact, how about off my porch until this is over, because you're kind of freaking me out. You know, like, wow, really intense.
Ever seen kind of piggybacking on that, I don't think I've ever seen so many people make a choice around their health without really spending much time researching. And the analogy that I use, and we get this all the time in here, is when my practitioner I work with, if he or I prescribe a Chinese herbal formula to somebody, we will often get a lot of questions. What are these ingredients? Are they safe? Are they going to coincide some way with my pharmaceuticals that I'm taking? Where do you get this from? We get a multitude of questions. And the minute that if there's anything, if there's any stomach upset, anything like that, it's okay, I'm not doing this anymore. And so to watch like you said, to kind of step back and watch what has occurred with so many people choosing an experimental vaccine, because it is still experimental. The clinical studies and trials are still ongoing without any kind of deeper questions. It actually was incredibly sad for me, because we primarily work with education here. We want to empower people and share what we know so they can make better decisions and share with people they love. And then you just felt really shushed from it. And I think that's part of what you and I are kind of talking about today when you say, what are your practitioners talking about, in their off time with each other? How are they processing this? And that's one of the things that I process with other practitioners is how do I keep trying to educate people or bring information that may create that cognitive dissonance, right? Like, wait a minute, I was told this and I believe this, but then you're telling me this, which is really different from what I understand. And that ability to have that open discussion and to enter into the gray zone. This is not black and white. We've got a lot of gray here. And isn't it valuable to have a lot of brains thinking about it and talking about it and processing it through?
Yeah, that's the V word, boy. That's a charged up one. In my practice, I'm absolutely leading with my commitment to sovereignty and people's right to choose the path they take for their bodies and for their family. I would say maybe half my practice chose to vaccinate and maybe half did not. And of those that did not, primarily they have experiences in their history where they've had poor results with vaccines, and some of them injuries, some of them just bad experiences that they were like, eesh, I don't think I'll do that again. So, watching the heartbreak of my people who chose not to vaccinate and see the slap down that they've gotten from their people, their friends, their families, because people are so scared and they're so vehemently, if they firmly believe that that's the way to go, do your part and all that, they can be really angry at the person who's not coming along with that philosophy. And on the other hand, the people who are sort of standing strong and choosing their path and building their immune systems and watching and waiting. They're not anti-vaxxers. These are people who vaccinate, but this, may not all of them vaccinate, but many of them do selectively choose which ones seem important to their families. But this one got their attention. Hold up, they're looking at the reports on the CDC of some of the injuries and deaths and things like that. And one of the things that I hear all the time is, well, that can't be as bad as all of the deaths we saw with COVID, with SARS-CoV-2. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of numbers of deaths we saw. There's some gray in there. There was a huge problem, no doubt. My question would be, okay, and here we go into the issue of there being a protocol that was researched out by several doctors that is getting great results. It's not a one size fits all protocol. It has many arms to it, depending on what's happening for the person. So when people tell me that they had someone who almost died or someone who died and they're so hurt and they're so mad that you would question how important this is, I want to see the records. I want to see the hospital records of what was tried. No blame anywhere, just continued critical thinking and understanding where we stand together so we can walk through it together. I'll just drop this in now. Dr. Pierre Corey, a pulmonologist, top-notch doc, teaches at some of the higher level medical schools. He was commissioned by, I believe, the National Institute for Health when this all started to please take a look at the drugs we currently have so that we can maybe find something we could use off-label, which just means this drug is for this purpose, but while we were using it, we found it's also actually good for this one over this issue. So he had 11 groups, 1,500 people in each study with placebo-controlled groups. And he came back hands down. I don't know if anybody's going to get to see this podcast, by the way, because we're using words that might get it taken down because the censorship is really pretty strong. But ivermectin, let me back up. There are a few stages, right, as people are getting ill with this virus. In the beginning, when the virus is just getting into the system and it's getting into the cells and starting to replicate, hydroxychloroquine, it's an ionophore, which means it pushes trace minerals into cells. So when you use hydroxychloroquine, it helps to push zinc into the tissues, which stops viruses from replicating. Now, please don't take anything I'm saying as black and white, but it is a strong property to those two products being used together. Hydroxychloroquine is an ionophore. So is quinine, that's in tonic water, and and so is quercetin. Quercetin is a nutritional supplement that assists pushing zinc into tissues. So when people are first getting sick, from my understanding, part of the protocol is to bring zinc into the cells to stop the replication. Having your vitamin D levels very high was also another great battle. 86% reduction. I probably shouldn't quote percentages because I don't have the study here in front of me. But the protocol was at early stages in his study, hydroxychloroquine, vitamin D, C, zinc. I'm sure everybody's heard this. NAC, which is a glutathione precursor that helps your liver detox stuff. It goes on. We can share this data with people who want it. So we'll have some links underneath this podcast. If you want a copy of this protocol, it's not for you to use. You should have a practitioner. But I do want the public to be aware that there is a protocol that was researched, 98% survival rate with this process that can be used if people are getting sick or if they're coming in already really sick. So hydroxy was the first one. If they're beyond the viral infection stage, now the virus is in, it's got the body working hard to get rid of it. You're in an inflammation stage. It's an inflammation that is profound. It's really a big hit, especially to the vasculature and especially in the lungs. So ivermectin was found in his study to pull people back from that huge inflammatory problem. All right, coupled with other things. Sometimes it was steroids, sometimes it was antibiotics. There's no one way. But there was a protocol mapped of if this, then this, if this, then this. And they were helping people come out of it. They didn't save everyone because that doesn't happen every year. We lose a lot of people every year to the flu and that sort of thing. So why am I going here? I guess not to disregard a person who had a personal experience that hurt their heart watching someone be so ill and potentially die. You and I need to know that there is a treatment for this, and it's being suppressed. It's being not allowed out in the public. You can find, again, I'll put a link in the notes today, that there is a video of Dr. Pierre Corey testifying in front of the Senate about his study and about the outcomes, and that if people went to the hospital and got sick and died from this virus and they didn't use any of this protocol, in his opinion, it's malpractice on that establishment, because it was a thorough study. It was as thorough, from my understanding, of the beginning stages of checking out how this vaccine would work. I don't want to say I don't care, but it's not my business what people do around vaccinating or not vaccinating. You know your body, you know what works for you. I support 1,000% your personal decision. And to leave off the table in this challenge we're in together, conversations about treatments that work, conversations about immune system strengthening that work, conversations about emotions and fear and the stuff that's driving people into unhealthy places, the rise in death rates from suicide and domestic abuse and all that. We can't ignore that whole thing and just be looking at one option and being mad at other people that aren't taking it.
Yeah.
Anyway, here we are. We weren't really going to go down this rabbit hole very far because we don't want to alienate people based on differing beliefs. But I guess we're sharing our hearts of what we've seen. And
yeah, I continue to think that it's incredibly important to share information, because we are getting one main story, and there's multiple stories here, because we are all unique in our health makeup and how we live and how we feel and our DNA. I mean, we're all unique. So there's these multiple stories, and all of it is so important to be talking about. And I think that's when you and I were pre-talking, right, before this was a concern of, we are both so passionate about people, really. We love our people, and we want them to live healthy, vibrant lives. And we want to be able to bring information that, some of it may be hard to hear. Some of it may be, you may be sitting there questioning what we're saying. But I think that's also part of it, is we encourage everybody to to dive in and do some of their own research, and to spend more time really looking at. And if you don't know who to look at, if you don't have doctors that you follow or people that you really admire, then we have these links below to help start guiding you. And I think that we all, we're so capable and so innately wise. And I think part of the problem is that we were so filled with fear. The media did an incredible disservice in the terror that they continue to put out every day, 7 days a week, for, well, it's still going. And so when you get really scared, you can't critically think, right? We know that if we have someone attacking us, we don't sit there and go, well, plan A could be this, plan B could be this. You take an action and you get out of the situation. And
you so want a solution that the first one that comes across the screen, you're like, good, I'll do it. That works,
Absolutely.
Maybe that dumbs it down a little bit, but you know what I mean.
No, but I mean, it is what happens. It's a very natural thing. Who wouldn't want a magic pill? I mean, really. And that goes for every health condition, right? Like,
that brings up this might be a bit of an aside, but I find it fascinating that ivermectin, which is an antiparasitic, veterinarians use it in animals, but it is something that's used across the across the globe,
Yes.
over the counter,
Yes.
been around for years.
Affordable, super safe, no side effects. Yeah.
There's a lot of people, a lot of physicians and other people in our area are taking it and not really talking about it. You know, there's a lot of that going on, right? Like people read the data and they're like, oh, I think I'll try this, but they show a different face to the public because the it's being made pretty clear that if you talk against what's being said in mainstream, your license can be on the line.
Yes.
So, you know, as a matter of fact, you and I might have to go back to bartending after this podcast. You know, but I've reached a place where I just can't care about it because I love my people so much. And this is an exploration. We're in this together. And where else in your life have you ever seen such a huge challenge be offered a one option? Come on. And I think the problem is we have not been put in a position where we need to go explore an effective pathway to legitimate information. Because everybody's got to study, depends on who paid for it, you know, both sides, all sides. There's not just two, there's multiple sides.
Yep.
So, you know, one thing I want to throw out there's an idea kicking around in a group that's been effective in other areas of challenge when we needed research data. You know, you have to pay $1,200 a year to be a subscriber to the National Institute for Health to get access to their research database, and it would give you the whole paper. You don't have to pay that. If you go out and just click around and find things, you'll get a summary, but it doesn't give you very in-depth understanding of the study, who did the study, who is the institution that pays for the study, all that data that's important to know. You know, if nothing else, this is a great practice for us to kind of shake off a little bit of fantasy, I guess, that we can trust everything we're told. So not to make it into a people are trying to trick us thing, but you know, it's hard to critically think about things that are not your area, you know?
Right.
So
well, then there's a level of transparency that that I would wish for that we're not getting. And I think, again, we have this culture that's set up that we're all running 1,000 miles an hour and we get a quick headline, right? It's email, Facebook, Instagram, you know, we get this quick little headline, but there's no transparency. So they don't say, you know, new NIH study funded by Pfizer, right, finds that XYZ. They don't say that. They just kind of pick out what they want you to know and give you a quick headline. And then you're like, oh, got it. You know, good to know. And the amount of time that you and I have spent digging deeper and watching podcasts and reading research articles and kind of doing our own homework, really, profound amount of time.
I don't know if your partner's getting irritated, but mine is.
Yes. And, you know, and it becomes this thing of like, really, I don't want to hear about this again. Right.
Put it down.
But who else is taking the time to do that?
I mean, lots of us are, but not in the general public. I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, we've watched our families, oh my God, working from home, kids at home, kids upset, missing graduations, missing weddings, missing funerals. Geez, you know, like it's been so much. It's been so much, so much.
It's heavy.
So much.
Yep.
Yeah, it is a lot. And I just, on an intuitive level, I feel like even though it's been just an absolute shit show, we're going somewhere good because we're having to stop. We're having to stop and realize we've got to pick up a little bit of responsibility for looking a little deeper into information that we hear. And you and I are not suggesting that people should look deeper and agree with us. Correct. We're saying look deeper so you've truly got a little bit more of informed status, and then you sit with yourself, everybody out.
Yes.
What makes sense to me? What am I choosing for myself? And, I guess the next layer is paying attention to policy and protecting the rights to choose of what you do with your body. If you're going to tell me that I am going to harm someone because I'm not vaccinated, I want to see the data on that. Because right now, my trust flag is a little low because we're not including data about protocols that seem to be working, and we're not including data about how you elevate your immune system function. So when you tell me that I might hurt someone if I'm not vaccinated, I want to see the research on that. I'm not saying I don't believe you. I'm saying I want to understand that more deeply. And if I saw it and saw that to be, um, a fairly sound conclusion, I'd be, oh my God, what can I do to be a part of not allowing that? But there's just a lot of off the hip, fear-based. Again, you can't compartmentalize these things and have a one size fits all. If you don't do it this way, you're evil.
Right.
I don't know. It's been really hard on the heart to watch all that, and to be have
Hard.
some of it targeted at me. That's been hard.
Yes, absolutely. And doing the research that I've been doing and my concern around um, what this vaccine potentially is doing or has done, because we've treated vaccine injury here, some quite serious, to see the people that I love so dearly make this choice is so heavy. You talk about heart heavy, and again, hoping that we as, like you said, we as humans are headed toward this better place of really stopping and checking in with ourselves, and that locus of control again that I mentioned, that what can I do every day to support my health and wellness, and what choices can I make that benefit me in that way, because our innate immune system is the most precious thing we have.
Yeah, I will say I didn't share this in the beginning, but in my own work, I use muscle testing along with other things. It's very similar to your approach in that we're using the nervous system to get information from the body, and I'm testing acupuncture alarm points that are connected to organs to assess the body for balance or lack of balance. And then I have these homeopathic test kits that let us see, okay, if the liver went weak, what might be part of the why? Is it a food? Is it a chemical toxin you didn't realize? Is it some sort of immune challenge? Not for diagnosing anything, but for understanding imbalances in the body and then making your way toward a plan for how you restore balance. Get the burden off the body so it can restore itself, really. I've never seen between people repetition in weak organ reflexes like I have this last year and a half. When people come in, either having had COVID and recovered or still recovering, or people post-vaccination, I would pick up weak liver, spleen, heart, lungs, tonsils, and brain. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh God, what do we do? Is it a big antiviral program? Like, how do I help? How do I get plugged in to try to help this situation? My relief was that the body was showing thinning the bile of the liver and flushing toxins from the liver was assisting the body's overburden. The body was overburdened by inflammation. I think the intensity of being exposed to the virus or to the spike protein that's in the vaccines creates a big immune response, and that has a toxicity to it. And it was happening at such a intensity that the detox organs potentially weren't keeping up with flushing that toxic stuff. So when we dealt with the liver, all those other weak reflexes would strengthen up. So it wasn't like we had a severe heart problem and lung problem and brain problem. It was more like, yeah, the detox system needs assistance. When we deal with that, the inflammation drops out of these other organs and things get moving in the right direction. I'm not saying it's the cure, but it was a part of helping a body stay stable. And yeah, I'm going to opt out on the rest of what I want to say about that, because there are some things I've seen that I'm still trying to understand, and I don't want to throw those out until I have more data.
Well, similar to you, what we started seeing over here is, so when I went and talked about how we take those 12 organ pulses and listen to kind of the channels of those organ systems, what we started seeing so profoundly as people started getting vaccinated was all of the yin organs. So your yin organs are the dense organs. So we have the heart, the lungs, the pericardium, which is that protective sac around the heart, kidney, liver, and spleen. And all of those organs in our body are like little sponges. And if there's anything that we can't detox, right? If there's anything that we can't move through, those organ systems soak up and hold it so we can function every day. They're very protective. And what we were seeing across the board was a complete decimation of those organ systems. And typically, when that presentation occurs in Chinese medicine, we call it yin deficiency, that these yin organs are all deficient. And it happens, but we don't see it multiple times a day. We were seeing it on almost every single client that walked through the doors. And it took us a while to figure it out, until one day I said to my colleague, God, everyone is so yin deficient. And he responded by saying, Melissa, I'm seeing the same thing. And as we began to talk more and compare more, it was a absolutely significant picture, with all of the yin organs, almost those pulses almost disappearing.
Wow.
So I was concerned. This started happening. We started kind of putting things together in March, like late February, March, and being like, wait a minute, what is going on? Because this is not at all normal. And so we actually sat down and put together a protocol through Chinese medicine. We kind of thought our way through, what are we seeing and how do we treat it? And we came up with a protocol, which actually is 2 different detox programs. So one of them is a series of 7 needles that is really good for when things kind of attack you from the outside. So you would think of that as like a concussion or a car accident, or someone kind of slamming into you, right? It's kind of something from the outside coming into you. And so we started there. And then we have a second protocol that targets these yin organs. And it's almost like opening a door to a steam room and just venting out anything that they're holding on to that they shouldn't be. So we combined those 2 detox protocols. And then we did some really strong immune support points, and everything rectified itself.
Awesome. So people were getting great results with that.
Yes. And so people were coming in, I wouldn't say we definitely had injuries that we saw, but people were also coming in just feeling tired, fatigued, off.
Not shaking it off.
Yeah, they just were kind of run down, and so we ended up, we detoxed everybody. I mean, if they had it, we detoxed them, and their pulses would return to normal, but they also aren't holding. So some people I've had to do the detox protocol more than once on, and then it's morphed into kind of, we've seen many. So once we detox, we see a lot of people come back and their whole right side yin organs are still very deficient. So that's lung, spleen, and pericardium, right? So we have the spleen is primary immune system, lung is secondary immune system, and then we have the pericardium, which we know this goes in and aggravates the lining of the blood vessels. So you have the circulation part. So we've seen that profile. We've seen heart and lungs again, completely deficient. We continue to see this yin deficiency profile. So we are continuing to, like you, it's almost like we're doing a live study because we're continuing to see as we clear and as we support the innate immune system, what our body's doing. And we're seeing a ton of what are called husband wife blocks, which basically means that the pulses switch sides. And it typically comes or occurs when something happens to us that our body can't make sense of. And so if it can be emotional, it can be physical, but our body just can't quite figure it out, and the pulses switch sides. So the left side, the husband side, which is supposed to be slightly more vibrant than the right, goes to the left, and the right goes to the left, and the left goes to the right. And in Chinese medicine, that is one of the most serious blocks you can have. And we're seeing that constantly right now. And so it's sort of morphed from all of the yin organs being completely deficient and almost absent, clearing them, they come up. Then we have this lung, spleen, pericardium thing, heart sometimes in there too, happening. We clear that. And now what we're seeing mostly are these husband-wife blocks that are just happening all the time.
Do they clear with what you do?
Yeah, yeah, they clear.
Awesome.
Everything clears, and that's what gives me hope, is that I feel like there's two parts, right? It's what you and I can do to help people, and then there's what the people can do to help themselves. And so you and I have shown, as we've gone through this, that we have tools that can really, really help the body detox, strengthen, and be as healthy as you can be.
Yep.
Because again, there's like part B of this conversation that we won't get to today around what's coming our way, right? And so to be as healthy as we can, but then there's the part of what people can do for themselves. And that's the part actually that worries me the most, because here we face this huge pandemic. We faced all of this fear around, literally, was this going to kill us or not? And there was no mention of what we could do every day to stay healthy. There still isn't.
Yep, it's a challenge, isn't it? Well, here we are talking about it. And I know there's a lot of practitioners on the ground, but there's, it just depends on what paradigm a person is kind of using for their wellness. Now, I do want to mention that I've had some people come through my practice who had COVID, got through it, didn't have any big deal. We've talked about the folks who had a harder time.
Yep.
Also with the vaccinating, I've treated some vaccine injured people in here, quite a handful. And I've also had people come through and be like, I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Yep.
I'm fine. I might still find in my testing that they need some detoxing, but they're like, okay, sounds good. Like, they're fine. So,
well, and what happened too is that they would say, I got it, I'm doing good. But when I took those pulses, their body wasn't okay.
Yeah. So you and I pick up underpinnings that if we can catch them early and help people flow those out, they don't have to have a drama.
Right.
So like we said, everybody's different. There's no one way. We should probably wrap up. We could talk forever.
Yes.
I just adore you. I'm so glad you're on the planet with me.
Ditto.
Yeah, and I really hope, for people who listen to this and listened it through to the end, we really want to respect everyone's position. We're in this together. It's an exploration. If you want to stay tuned, I will be bringing on other people to talk about additional views and approaches to how we want to stay well during all these things going on and accept one another's choices with love and compassion and inclusion and There are going to be some policy making things hitting soon that I will also be covering. I'm deeply committed to protecting my families who cannot vaccinate based on injuries they've had in their families, that they choose not to go that route. And I'm extremely committed to them maintaining all of their rights, as I think is important for everyone. This issue, you might be on this side of the policy, but the next issue you may not be. So preserving the right to be sovereign and understand, how do we reach the data. So stay tuned. We'll have another show where we talk about access to research papers, and we were thinking about maybe doing a little workshop webinar on how to critically look through a paper. Like, how do you, as a layperson, you're not going to read the whole thing one end to the other because it's a lot, but how do you look at a research paper and understand the main points of it and be able to tear it apart a little bit, like who wrote it, who paid for it. And you may, of 10 that you look at, find 2 that you feel like you can trust. The other ones you can't be so sure. But once you bring your brain into that area, or listen to someone you trust who's doing it, who's sharing what they saw, I think this is the way we come together to find that middle way and allow one another to make our way through this in the ways that we need to for ourselves. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we sign off?
Oh, well, there's always things I want to add. Like you said, you and I could talk forever about things.
How can people find you if they're within your area and they want to have your help kind of assessing what's happening in their bodies?
Yeah, so they can find me under gratitudeforwellness.com. And yeah, please feel free to reach out and contact us. We're always happy to educate, to treat, to listen. Like you said, we're in a really big gray area, and I just feel like everybody's experience is important. Um, and for all of us to just be willing to keep the conversation open, being willing to listen to things that might be uncomfortable, and then spend some time and do some of your own research and really understand um, what's being offered, and check in with your own wisdom.
Yeah. So on that note, I'll also drop some links in, how people can find Cedarwood Natural Health Center is the practice that I have here in South Burlington, Vermont. I didn't mention hyperbaric oxygen. I won't go down the rabbit hole about it right now, but because this virus and sometimes the vaccine, if someone has a poor response, it seems to hit the vasculature. Hyperbaric oxygen can be extremely useful. It's not the one size fits all or the one answer to everything, but it has really made some profound differences in some of my people's path as they're moving out of, if they had a difficulty with either the virus itself or a vaccine. And for the people who are doing well, who maybe chose the vaccine pathway and they're doing well, I'm so happy. And we're all getting there one way or another. If you have information that you really want us to see, Melissa and myself, data that you have uncovered that could share a point that we didn't cover today, or that maybe is opposite of what we were kind of saying today, please, I would love to see it. This is all open. This is a learning process. So my email will be in the links below, in this podcast. And I am looking for data that supports the views that people are holding so intensely. So if you have something to share, I'd love to see it. And I look at it with super open heart and open eyes. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here with me. And stay tuned. We'll be bringing on other practitioners. And I really appreciate the work that you do, Melissa.
Thank you. Ditto.
Gratitude for Wellness in Willsboro, New York. And once again, I'm Dr. Suzy Harris, and this is my podcast called Next 7. This is a podcast that is dedicated to giving voice to the intention of offering clean food, actually providing access for everyone to clean organic food, clean water, and functional medicine, so that we can be well and vital and focus on things that keep bringing us to higher levels of joy and vitality, and leave a planet behind us for the next 7 generations that can thrive. Okay, so for now, we sign off, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.